Hi, and today's guest, we have Michael Sodini from Walk the Talk America. How you doing, Michael?
I'm doing good, man. I'm glad to be here. I know you're kicking off this show, and I'm glad to be a part of it.
Well, you'll be our first guest that we have going live on the podcast, and looking forward to the topic. Walk the Talk America, something real dear, I think, to my heart, and I think it will hit a chord with other people that listen that may not have heard about Walk the Talk America. Uh, so, who is Michael Sodini, and where's he come from?
Yeah, so I'm a third generation firearms industry professional. I got into the firearms industry through nepotism.
Ah,
Um, my my family owned one of the largest importers of firearms in the U.S. And so basically, what we were, for anyone in the listening audience that is not familiar with how firearms importation works, is if you had a firearms company, and let's say you were in Colombia or somewhere in Europe, right? And you had an interest and you had a firearm and you had an interest in breaking into the US market, you would find somebody like us, which was at the time called, it was Eagle Imports. And we used to import Bursa from Argentina, Grand Power from Slovakia, and uh, Metro Arms, which is American Classic, Mac, and SPS from the Philippines. So you would find somebody like us to basically do your importing, handle your sales, handle your customer service, your warranty. It's like a turnkey operation, right? You just sell it to us and we build your brand in the US and take care of everything else. So I got into the firearms industry not because I was interested in guns at all. I was basically told by my family, like, it was an assumption, like, you're coming to work with us. My grandfather and my uncle had started this business, which actually played into my advantage when it came to what we're about to talk about today. Because not growing up around firearms, because I didn't. I grew up with a single mom in San Francisco, and my family's company was in New Jersey, right? Probably two of the worst places to grow up if you're into firearms.
yeah.
you know. So anyways, got into the industry after college and literally learned on the fly. Learned about firearms and rights and everything, like, on the job. So that's my background.
Okay. So, Walk the Talk America is something that, like we were talking just before we started recording, is something that I find is that missing link that kind of breaks that taboo subject that a lot of people are need assistance, but are afraid to reach out because of that taboo and what could happen. So, what is Walk the Talk
Okay, so Walk Talk America, it basically, we are a organization that's homegrown from the firearms industry that looks for innovative ways to get people the help they need when they're in crisis without fear of consequence. We figure out ways to work with people outside of the 2A community, the Second Amendment community, the firearms industry, and kind of cherry pick the things that we think will make a difference, and then also has nothing to do with legislation, right? Because we believe that the answers are there. I feel like this one, and let me rewind for a second. Let me go back to kind of what sparked this, but it wasn't the main reason why I started it. But in 2009, the president of my company, Eagle Imports, the one I was just talking about, took it. The president's name is Bill Strominger. He took his life with one of our firearms, and at that time, in 2009, suicide was not talked about in the firearms industry. And one of the main reasons was, I think we were all scared that things like that would be weaponized against us, or we knew it, right? Anybody that's in the firearms community, whether you're a trainer, whether you own a gun shop, we all know that any negative outcome is going to get used in that giant number that they throw out every year, right? So, and there was kind of this rhetoric from the NRA that was kind of like, if you can't trust mental health, or just gun grabbers, and it kind of made sense for everything that was going on back then. But I always wanted to do something that helped people, because one of the things that the president of the company at the time and I used to talk about, and this, we could touch on this later, right? Because usually people that talk about suicide, or they notice something about suicide, or mental health, they're in tune to it. So Bill and I, used to talk about how crazy it was that the gun industry didn't really do anything to address mental health when we were losing the people that our industry holds near and dear to our hearts the most. And I'll give you an example of that. So we used to have a booth at SHOT Show, and we used to have couches, right? Like that was our, so if anyone been to SHOT Show, like everyone's just bouncing around booths and talking. It's kind of like a gun store. If anyone goes in the gun store, we used to call it like the barber shop, the white man's barber shop. Now it's everybody's barber shop, because now you have all different walks of life, right? You have the fastest growing shooters of minorities and women, right? So now it's everybody's barber shop. People will go into gun shops and just literally talk to the guy at the counter all day, and people will, customers will talk. It's a fun experience. It's interesting to watch. But we used to have all kinds of people that would come to our booth every year, and it was almost like we expected to see those faces again and again and again. And so many of them were, former military, active duty military, first responders. Like I said, the people that our industry absolutely stops and salutes no matter what. And every year it seemed like we would lose one person, and it would be like, it's weird, John didn't show up this year, I hope he's okay, right? And then you'd find out later, like, hey, I don't know if you heard about John, but John took his own life. And it was like it's one of those things where you're looking at this like, hey, we're not supposed to talk about this, we don't address it, we don't know how to, but it's something that affects our industry, because obviously, 22 a day, all those things that you heard back then. It was kind of like, why didn't we do something? Now, I didn't know what to do after Bill took his life. I didn't have the idea for Walk Talk America. Walk to Talk America was born from a conversation in 2018. So cut to 9 years later, when I met a complete stranger that asked a question. She was asking about what happens during a mass shooting. And I basically told her the truth. I said, everybody blames us. We blame mental health, and nothing ever gets done because we can't work together, because the solutions that they have all deal with stuff that we can't accept, right? Like infringing on rights and punishing people who actually do the right thing with a firearm, which is the vast majority of people that own firearms.
Right.
And after I said that, she asked one question, completely changed my life. She was like, if you can't work with the mental health community on those things because of legislation, like what are the policies or what are the things that you can work on with them? Because I'm sure there are things you can work together on. And I thought about it, and I was like, I don't think we do. We don't, right? And that's how Walk the Talk America was born. It was from a like chance conversation where someone asked a question. And at the time, I didn't even know if it was possible, right? But it's something I became obsessed with. And then 1 year later, I ended up selling Eagle Imports to do this full time, because there was a need for this. People wanted this. So that's how Walk the Talk America came about. And we can kind of get into the details as this conversation starts to flow about what we do. But that's how it started.
Yeah, I know gun grabbers and people, blame guns for a lot of the incidences, and in all actuality, a lot of and I've heard you mention this before, but about what is 2/3 of the actual gun deaths are not from mass shootings; they're from
Suicide.
suicides.
Yeah.
And
Yeah.
that's a big number. And like that I've actually witnessed from my time in law enforcement, the number of people that do take their lives with firearms, and a lot of time it's something that it's not just something that people can maybe recognize, but a lot of it is life, people going through life, the divorce, medical diagnosis that they are unprepared for, and financial, job related, everything that can pile on to an individual and weigh them down. We all handle stress and everything differently. Uh, for those of us with firearms, we need to be more vigilant, and for those that are around us, I think we need to be aware of the signs and how to help people. And like I said, that's one thing I love about your organization, that you're able to go out and help people recognize mental health and guns is a serious topic, and that we do have resources available out there that people can go to without the fear of having, being labeled as a lunatic or whatever, someone that's
Mhm.
not able to possess a gun. And a lot of us, I think, we would recognize, hey, I'm not in the place that I need to be. I'm going to get a family member or someone else to hold my guns, lock my guns up where legally they can. Of course, there are still I think, some locations where that would be a felony or against the law, and it's something that you need to check with your local jurisdiction. But it's something that I think is very valuable, and just getting us as individuals getting proactive in laws, trying to get these exemptions as far as where somebody can, if they recognize, they're doing the right thing or something good, that they're not penalized for trying to help save somebody. And
Yeah. Yeah. The unintended consequences is what you're talking about of
yeah,
these things. And that's so in the beginning, like when I started this, I didn't know what was going to happen, but I knew after the first year of doing Walk Talk America, I was like, if it ends today and nothing else comes of this, at least I got the firearms industry thinking about mental health, right? Because I feel like for so long it was kind of like there's so many good people in the 2A community. Just like, I mean, take it from me, like a guy who, when I first got into the community, I was like, I am nothing like these people. Cause most of the time I was hanging around with people that were talking about hunting, fishing, all these things that I never did growing up. Right. Like I never went shooting. I didn't have a dad who took me shooting. There was a learning curve that I had to hit. But what I did love about the 2A community in the firearms industry was how welcoming like they were, and how many like good solid individuals there are in this industry. Just like everything, you have your clowns, but you know uh overall it's kind of like when I would go back to my friends who didn't understand firearms and they didn't understand the industry, they would talk about the industry in a certain way, like, oh, the NRA is doing this, or it's racist or anything like that. And I was like, no, it's really not. Like if you if you actually hang out at an NRA show, or you hang out at any kind of event like a shot show, it's like what they're saying, like, hey, people celebrate during a mass shooting. Like I've never seen that. I've never seen that. We hate that, right? And so for me, if Walk the Talk would have ended just on that, just the fact that people were talking about mental health, but here we are, cut to, right? Like now we're in this position where I think it's super important for our industry to lead the way on this, and similar to how alcohol got ahead of drunk driving, right? Like nobody's blaming Johnny Walker when somebody gets behind the wheel and does something horrific, right? So for me to have the industry like step up and have firearms trainers like yourself and um, gun shops saying, look, you have to be prepared as a gun owner for everything. You have to be prepared for outside threats. You have to be prepared for this. You have to have safety down, right? Like all this stuff. We also have to have this key element of firearms ownership, which is your mental game. Your mental game has to be up everywhere, right? Like you have to know it, and it also extends to everybody else who is around you with that firearm in the house. So there's nothing wrong with being prepared. We talk. That's why we train. That's why we take courses. I think that's why we do it, is to be prepared. So to have the preparation of the mental game too, to say, I may not be in crisis. Like maybe I am. Like I don't know. Like I'm not feeling too good because of the things that you said earlier, right? Maybe it's money issues. Maybe you got family members fighting. You're just like, I need to be on top of it as a gun owner, and there's nothing wrong with that. And once we like accept that, once we take that all in, and we're like, okay, we're doing the most. And believe me, I know it sounds crazy, but like I think right now, the firearms industry is, with the people that are actively involved in WTTA, the Rugers, the Arms Corps, the Cannon Safes, like the things that they're doing, it's so different than what the mental health community can do, because they don't have the reach we do. They can't, all they could do is say like, hey, we'd love for you to say this. It's all language, right? And most of the time they don't know the language. So they have to rely on us to know the language. But us being proactive, Now we're going to be taking serious on a national level with all the people that thought originally that we don't care or we don't do anything. You see what I mean? Like that's why it's important for us to kind of take this and run with it. Don't let the government tell us what to do with it. Like show the government we're already on top of it. Like you can't help us. You know what I mean? Like we got this. So it's been kind of fun this last 5 years. You know, it's a wild ride.
Great, great. I'm glad to see, and I think what you're actually in got the some of the people in the firearms industry, manufacturer wise and ammo wise, that are actually supporting you and backing your by putting aren't they putting like labels and cards and stuff in their
Yeah,
merchandise?
so that was the first. So here's the fun part about Walker Talk America. When I first started the organization, I'm grabbing a card to show you to show the listeners. But when I first started the organization, I want to take the easy way out. Like in my head, I was like, we'll raise money in the firearms industry and we'll donate it to mental health. And when I first started, I didn't even know if there was a mental health organization that was going to listen to me because you know how people think about us, right? Like they have these like preconceived notions and just whatever. We're stigmatized. We our industry is stigmatized just like mental health. But anyway, so I ended up connecting with Mental Health America, and the idea in the beginning was, hey, look, I'm going to donate money. I'm going to go to the Rugers and I'm going to go to the Arms Corps and I'm going to go to the Bursas and I'm going to get them to donate money and we're going to donate it to you and you're going to solve the problem. Like you're going to fix the problem. And originally I was kind of aiming towards what can we do to stop mass shootings? And this is actually a really important part of our conversation today for people to understand, because sometimes people are like, well, why are you focusing on the gun? Well, number one, I focus on the gun because I'm from the gun industry. If I worked in the rope industry, I'd probably focus on ropes, right? But I'm in the gun industry. But we all seem to think that there is a way to stop mass shooters, right? And there are things, obviously this goes beyond just mass shooters. There are things you can identify in people, but it really is finding a needle in a haystack, because for as much as these mass shooters have shown a particular behavior that you could point to, just like gun owners, you could point to a million examples of people that had that same behavior and never shot up a grocery store or school, right? So when I first started, the whole idea was, hey, I'm going to give you all this money. You're going to run out there and figure out how we end this, and we're all going to work together. Well, I learned real fast that they didn't have the answers. And everybody on the mental health side, epidemiologists, like all these people were just like, hey, listen, you gotta slow down, focus on suicide prevention. And I was like, that's great, I want to do suicide prevention too, but I really want to do mass shooters, so we're going to do it all. And they're just like, no, laser focus on suicide prevention, because it is the one thing that you guys can actually make a dent in, right? And at first I couldn't understand it. I was like, make it make sense for me. And they're just like, fighting the next mass shooter is the needle in a haystack. And I said, okay, well, explain that to me. And I remember it was Dr. Jeffrey Swanson out of North Carolina. Yeah, he's a leader in epidemiology. And he basically was like, you could take a gun and hand it to 10 people that have schizophrenia or bipolar disorder. And he's like, they'll go their whole life without doing anything to anybody, even themselves. And he's like, you could come home one day after a really tough day at work, find your wife in bed with your best friend and snap. And he's like, needle in a haystack. And I was like, damn, he's right. Right. But like with suicide prevention, if we can be on the forefront of giving our customers or our students, right, the information and the resources to where they could stay on top of it or get help when they want it. Like I said before, that's the cherry on the top. Just the fact that you're letting your students know or your customers know that you're making it okay to talk about mental health or think about your mental health. Like take, for example, Ruger or Arms Corps. Arms Corps is a perfect example of people who put the screening on the side of the box. And this is an example. This is a card. It's kind of tough to see, but this is a card that Ruger and Bursa and Arms Corps, they put in all the boxes of their guns, and it basically says, mental health, it's okay to talk about it. We're from the firearms industry. Take a free and anonymous mental health screening. Stay on top of your mental health. And I can't stress enough how important it is to stay on top of it. Screenings aren't just for people who are in crisis. You don't have to be like, well, I feel wonderful, I don't need a screening. It's good to take the screening even if you feel great, right? Because you need to see where you're at. And the screenings are free and anonymous, which is gun owners we love, especially the anonymous part. You don't have to give them any information, because we partner with Mental Health America on this. They don't ask you about firearms at all. So there's nothing in there that asks you about your guns or anything like that. It's just it's the different categories of what you want to do, whether that's, I think I might be depressed. I think I might be suffering from anxiety. I think I might have ADHD, right? So you can go on there and take those. And that was the first step. That was the first step of getting the industry. And and I know I'm a little long-winded on this, but I love talking about it. But like the first, I didn't know at first. I didn't know how the industry would react to this, right? Because one of the biggest fears I had as someone who owned a gun company was I didn't want like the NRA or NSSF being like, Mike, what are you doing? Like, what are you doing here? Like, you're walking a very fine line. And I kept putting them in my guns, which was the guns that Eagle imports. And thank God I had these foreign manufacturers who, they're not in touch with what we do as much. So they were kind of like, what is it? And I'm like, free and anonymous mental health screenings for our customers so they can stay on top of their mental health and be good. We want our customers to be good, right? And they're just like, yeah. So you could do it. So we're putting a card in the box, and I'm waiting. Like, I waited like 3 months just to see what type of reaction, because I didn't know if there was going to be a negative reaction. I didn't know if customers were going to call and being like, what are you doing? And it was the complete opposite. We were getting so many customers that were calling, and they're like, hey, you put this in the box. I just bought a Bursa and it's inside the box. Thank you. Like, I really appreciate you doing that. Right. And then I was like, oh, this is cool. It's like good PR for us. You know what I mean? Like so then it graduated, and I was like, okay, nothing's happened. I'm not on the NRA's like, what are you doing list. I started walking around at SHOT Show to my friends, like my peers that I grew up with in this industry, like Martin from Arms Corps or Charlie Brown from High Point, MKS. And I was just like, hey, can you put this in your box? And they're like, what is it? Free and anonymous mental health screenings. And I'm like, pause, wait, see what they're like. That's a really good idea. Yeah, we could do that. I was like, damn, it's that easy. Right. It's just, I feel like as an industry, and that includes everything from firearms trainers to, I feel like we always wanted to do something, but we just didn't know how to fit into it. Because it's not
Finding that
rocket science.
merge, that
Right.
uniqueness to join together.
Yeah, almost like we couldn't, right? Like we thought it was mutually exclusive. You can't have guns and you can't talk about mental health or suicide prevention. Like, they're mutually exclusive. They're not. Like, we totally can. And it can come from us. It's actually better coming from us because, and this is what I say when I speak in front of, anyone that's from the outside, the mental health side or the healthcare provider side. I'm like, the industry, if you walk around our industry, everybody, there was a time when I felt like I was the only one who didn't serve the country, like at the SHOT Show. You know what I'm saying? Like everybody that works in the industry, like they all had served or they were all a first responder at some point in their life. And I was kind of like, damn, I'm like the only one in the, right? So first responders and vets and active duty military, they gravitate towards our community, right? It's a natural fit, like you, right?
Yeah.
Right. So, for when I saw that, and I was kind of like, who are they going to listen to? People listen to the groups that they trust, right? Skateboarders or surfers have their own community. And I thought, we're no different. The gun industry is just like a Star Wars freak that goes to a convention, right? Like we trust the information that's going to be passed by our people. So that's why it's so important for us to do it, not mental health. Like, we work with mental health, but we do it as the community.
Yeah, I think this is part of the missing link, like we've talked before, that was needed because the fear of, I don't want to be labeled as someone needing mental health assistance, but I've got this issue, and I think it shows that us as firearms owners, distributors, and everything, that hey, we do care about this topic, and we're wanting to, we're not wanting to push it off just on somebody else. We're wanting to actually get involved and help better everybody's lifestyle, and keep everybody safe. I think it's a very good thing that you're doing with this, because it shows that we do care. We care about individuals. We're not pushing it off. And I know, listening to a prior podcast, you made a comment that the organization that you partnered with, finding someone in the mental health industry that was gun neutral,
Hmm.
didn't blame the gun, uh, where I think that was a key also, is finding that great partnership that you have with your provider to kind of partner and push this agenda. I really like that. It shows your heart that you're out there serving both sides and trying to bring them together to let's try to solve this situation.
Well, and it's and I appreciate that. Thank you. It's been really interesting because one of the things, and I've said this in other shows, but it's really true. One of the things that used to drive me crazy about just anything is like when I had employees that would like come to me and they'd point out problems and they had like zero solutions. Like they're like, yeah, there's a problem back there, and it's like, yeah, I know, I could see it. But it's like, I don't care if it's a silly solution. And I feel like that's the one thing we as an industry, that's where I get critical of us, is we always kind of lacked that. Well, it's a mental health thing, there's nothing we can do, right? Like we almost defaulted to that. And it's kind of like, well, there is something we can do, and we figured that out. Like we've now figured out that we could do a lot. And like I said, it's almost to the point where I think we've figured it out, and we've transcended beyond what the mental health community can offer us. They can, I'm not saying they can't offer things, right? Just the screenings alone that they do is brilliant. But like I said, we have the reach, we have everything. So now we're better equipped to bridge the gap with people that don't see eye to eye with us. And I'll give you an example of that. A couple months ago, I was invited to speak at the Aspen Institute of Health festival, which is a very like heavy hitter, mostly center left group of people that deal with anything that's in healthcare. So it's not just guns or anything like that, right? It's everything that deals with healthcare. So I was invited to be one of their guest speakers, which was an honor in itself. I was the very first person from the firearms industry to be asked to speak there. And I was amongst all different types of speakers, everyone from like Dr. Fauci to Chelsea Clinton to Fink from BlackRock. Like there's all these different walks of life speaking at this event, and I was treated with the utmost respect. But really going into that situation, I knew that I could win that crowd over because they tried to warn me. They were scared for me. It was cute because like numerous times I had numerous people that are like, hey, listen, this crowd is not necessarily like, sometimes guns is kind of a triggering thing for them. So da 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 da. And they didn't realize like I do this all day in my sleep. Like it's fine.
Right.
I'm better. Sometimes I'm better in front of the non 2A crowd than I am in front of the 2A crowd, because the 2A crowd tends to be kind of stuck in their ways. Whereas the non 2A crowd, it's like, once I show them as an industry what we're doing, and going back to that, we've transcended past just the talking points like mental health awareness and all those things that are important,
Right.
but really is like, what are you doing? You're advocating, but you're not really doing anything. Once I get the crowd or the people to see what we do, they're drawn in by it. Like
Okay.
they're like, oh my God, like I never even thought about that. Like mental health screening flyers in the boxes of the guns. And you guys are doing that. And I'm like, yes, like Ruger is doing that,
Yeah.
So then what happens is once they see that we're providing solutions, they back off their stance a little bit. Because I
Mm.
felt like many people for many years, the gun grabbers, and we're like, okay, if you don't want to do legislation, what do we do? And we're like, I don't know. It's a mental health thing. Right now, now we're at least saying, okay, let me show you what to do. You
Right.
want me to show you what to do? You can't do what we do, but we'll show you how good we do it.
Okay.
Right. So,
Yeah.
so for me, when that happens, when the barrier breaks down and they're ready to listen and
Hmm.
accept information, now we've really bridged the gap because they're like, okay, this is cool. I see where they're going with this. Now I'm listening. And we talked about earlier barriers to entry, right? So
Right.
one of the things that came out of the Aspen Institute thing, because I was on a panel and they asked about red flag laws. And of
Hmm.
course, the two mental health people, the two healthcare people, they were like, red flag laws are great, they da 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 da. And I'm like, I live in a different world than these two.
Right.
I'm not saying they're wrong. Like, I'm not saying they're wrong. Like, there's probably times when a red flag has stopped somebody, if that somebody
Yeah.
has admitted,
Yeah.
like, I was gonna kill myself, right? Like
Hmm.
there are outliers, there are anecdotal stories we can all tell on things. But I was like, I live in a world where red flag laws probably cost people their lives because they're afraid to go get help.
Right.
So unintentional consequence of being afraid to go get help. And it
Yeah.
was crazy because like the crowd, there's so many people came up to me after because they wanted to chat or talk. And they're
Hmm.
like, I never thought about that red flag laws in that way. Because
Right.
I always thought it was you guys going, I want to arm everybody, right?
Yeah.
Like, and just being stubborn. And I'm like, no. See, I live in a world where 1 to 2 people contact me a week and they're like, I I want to go get help, but I'm afraid to because of
Right.
this red flag law in Florida or this,
Hmm.
what do I do? How do I do this? So the unintentional consequences, like you said, now we have a spot at the table where people, it doesn't mean they're going to change the laws, but at
Right.
least they're listening. Transfer laws. The fact that like in Nevada, where I'm sitting right now, if you come to my house and I don't look so good, like because my wife just left me or something like that, I can't
Hmm.
even give you my gun to
Wow.
take. You know what I mean? Like those that has to change. Like
Yes.
we might not be able to get rid of transfer laws, but we can totally navigate them with now that we can come to the table and say this is the issue with that. And many times, this is the other crazy thing. A lot of times these people have never thought about it from that lens because they're not in our shoes,
Right.
so it's important to bring them into our world and not necessarily be combative.
Yeah.
They're, it is what it is.
So you've got a lot of things available on through Walk the Talk America that people can go to actually straight on the website. I know a couple of things that I noticed that I'm grateful for that you have are some of the resources that you have, like your free screenings and your directory where you can put in your location and actually find somebody that's partnered with Walk to Talk America and the mental health organization you're with to work on trying to help them overcome or get through whatever struggle they're going through. Do you want to elaborate on any of those, or some of the maybe some of the other resources that you have on your website?
Yeah, absolutely. One of the things that I'm really proud of, as a whole of the organization, obviously, it's like me talking about my child. So it's like, take what I say with a grain of salt because I'm never going to say anything bad about my kid. But, but one of the things that we kicked off at Walk Talk America was a cultural competence course for mental health clinicians. And we had decided, because I had found a mental health clinician named Jake Wiskershin,
Mhm.
who was super pro gun, but he walked in this world of his profession where it was kind of a no-no to be pro gun.
Right.
And for a long time, like Jake was like, I can't, like the first time I met Jake, I was on one of his podcasts. He had a mental health podcast, and I was so
Mm.
excited because he was the first person on the mental health side that had brought me on. I had been doing the rounds of all of the firearms industry podcasts and radio shows,
Okay.
but like, getting on Jake's show it's called Noggin Notes, and it was really exciting because he was bringing me in. And I remember the first time we talked, he said, listen, I got to tell you something before we go on air. I'm a gun owner and I have my CCW, but listen, we cannot talk about it. And I was like, okay, that's cool, right? But cut to Jake and he starts to become more involved in WTT after he hears about what we're doing. So we had come up with this idea to start a cultural competence course for mental health clinicians that will give them CEU credits, continuing education credits. So every year they have to get so many credits towards their license. And we thought this is a great way to educate people that don't understand us, and we could show them about our fear. And and so the course took off, and it became this thing where we were like, oh my God, like we have to keep throwing these things. And then COVID hit, because we used to do it in person. That we brought it online.
Wow.
And it just soared from there. I thought it was going to be the death of it. I was like, who's going to sit through 3 hours? But I didn't realize that I think a lot of people don't want to actually come into a classroom or a shooting range. They might want to learn at home.
Right.
But the greatest thing about this course is that, you could take it at your own leisure, and you don't necessarily have to come out of it. We don't, the expectation level is not that you're going to be all like super gung ho about firearms, but you're just going to get a different perspective. And it worked like a charm. We would get all kinds of feedback. Like there were so many people that would say, like, this is an example, this is anecdotal, but like one person I remember, because it really touched me, had written, when I was anti-gun when I came into the course, and now I'm gun neutral. And I was like, that's exactly where I want you to go.
Right.
But anyway, so the evolution of that eventually, because we became sort of this resource for people were calling, and we don't do actually any, like, you can't call Walk the Talk America if you're in crisis. We will help you. We will try to find someone for you to talk to, but we're not licensed. We can't do that. So, I was getting calls and getting people emailing me that were doing a thing where they were just like, hey, like I got somebody who's in trouble, or this and that, and do you have anybody in your area? So about a month ago, like Jake and I were like, we need to start our own national directory. Like we need to get clinicians who are not afraid to come out and say, like, I own a gun, or I'm pro 2A.
Right.
Because if you look at mental health clinicians or people that work in any kind of healthcare, there are categories. Like if you go to Psychology Today and you look up, just put in your zip code, there are literally like groups there are clinicians that specialize in like airline pilots, or like moms, right? And so our whole thing is why can't we have culturally competent in firearms, or pro Second Amendment, whatever, right? Like, and that's what we're building now. And we feel like this network that we're building, ideally what we want is we want to have at least one person, just to start off, is one person in every state. But I think we have like 15 states right now. I want one Jake Wiskerson, right? I want one person that can do telehealth and be available, but this is the start. And I think once we have this network of clinicians that kind of speak our language, and every one of these clinicians, by the way, we don't just let anybody on there.
Okay.
You have to go through the course. You could either take the free one, or you could take the one where you pay for it and you're guaranteed to get your CEU. Some states recognize it, some don't. Like in Nevada, if you take the free one, you could just submit it to the state licensing board and they'll give you your CEUs. Other states, we're not sure, but we took care of that angle by partnering with a company that will let you pay. We actually pay half the fee.
Right.
So like we encourage that. So you get CEU credits for like $25 by sitting to the course, but they all come through the course. So when they're listed on directory, it's somebody that is culturally kind. It's not just somebody who's like, yeah, I don't care. Like, I don't care if you're into guns, like you can still come to me. No, they know like what we're talking about. So, I'm excited about that. I think to me, once we get this thing really off and running and going, to me, it's like a small little army of people who are going to be representing us that can kind of do both things, right? They can walk in that mental health space and then obviously come right into the firearm space, and they understand the complexities, the nuance, everything that we go through as firearms owners. So that's what that's all about.
Okay, good. So if somebody wanted to find out more about Walk the Talk America, or contact you or the company, what's where would they find out about you?
Well, first and foremost, our website, WTTA.org. There's a lot of information on there to digest and go through, but walktalkamerica.org or WTTA.org. If you're on social media, it's at Walk the Talk US, and that's the platforms we're on are Facebook, Instagram, and Twitter. So at
Okay.
Walk the Talk US. And if you have any questions, you can email us or send us a message. We always have somebody monitoring something, so
Okay.
we're on top of it, and we're pretty responsive. And we're there to answer any of your questions you have, or even if you want to share a story, right? Like there's been advocacy that we've done through someone reaching out to us saying, "Hey, did you know about this?" or "This is a problem," and then we can that's the other beauty of having a good relationship with Mental Health America. Is pretty much if I spot something that isn't really, it goes against the Mental Health America way, right? Like it
Right.
stigmatizes mental health, or there's somebody who's being screwed over, who lost their rights. We can kind of be an advocate for them if they tell us the story, because we could share those stories with Mental Health America and the other organizations that we work with and kind of point out like, hey, don't be a hypocrite. This is what you told
Right.
us. Here's a perfect example. So sometimes bills get shot down,
Right.
and we bring it to people's attention that normally wouldn't look at it.
Okay. Well, I appreciate your time this afternoon, and talking about Walk the Talk America. Like I said, it's something that I've fell in love with, and I put in all of my firearms classes, and it's I'm thankful for your heart and what you're doing for the firearms community and the mental health community, trying to bridge them together to where we can meet in the middle and try to. We probably won't ever solve it completely, but at least we've got a firm ground to where we can start working on and trying to minimize any effects that are out there. So,
Yeah, no, thank you, thank you for the support, and thank you for the kind words, and really thank you for incorporating that into the people that you educate. That says a lot too, and it's super important, because people are going to respect you, and if you're not afraid to talk about it and you make them aware of it, then they know it's okay as firearms owners. You know what I mean?
okay.
So, yeah,
All
I
right.
think it's great.
Okay. One thing I didn't go on warn you about beforehand. What's what's your hobby or your relief from life? What do you find enjoyment away from the stress of the everyday routine?
Ooh, it's a good question. Does it ever not get stressful? No, I have a beautiful family, very supportive of what I do. As a matter of fact, like when I get done off here, I'm actually going to be interviewed by my daughter, who's doing a class
Oh,
project on Walk to Talk America. Um, so it's really like putting my attention into my family. I got beautiful kids. I got beautiful dogs. It's really staying focused. But honestly, uh, Walk to Talk America is to me like it, it's bigger than just a job.
okay.
It's just become a way of life for me. So it's like helping others, which I indirectly or directly do on a daily basis. That
Right.
kind of is my therapy.
Okay. Okay.
Yeah.
Cool. Well, thank you for sharing that. And if I'll put all that contact information in the show notes for the podcast. And I hope if anybody has any questions or anything, feel free to reach out to Michael or even myself, and we'll get you in contact with them. But thank you, Michael, for your time. And I hope you have a wonderful interview with your daughter.
Thank you. Thank you.
Thank you, sir.